Hi guys, Aceface back with another video for you, and today I have the eagerly awaited review of the new Tyranid Codex. So in this video what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a brief overview of the Codex. I'm going to talk a little bit about my initial thoughts on it, what I think is particularly good, what I think is not so good, and just a general overview. Then what I will do in other videos that I'm going to link below is talk a little bit of detail about some of the big things within this codex. So I'll talk in detail about the different hive fleets, and I will talk in detail about the stratagems, because ultimately they're probably the biggest change for the Tyranid army and the ones that you're going to want to know an awful lot about. And in those videos I will talk about some advanced tactics, how to use them. But as I said, in this video what I want to do is talk a little bit about what's in here, what's cool, what I think is cool, and particularly for you new Tyranid players, what to kind of start going with, what to kind of get your hands on, just to kind of get yourself into the Tyranid army. So hopefully it's going to be fun for you and it's going to be useful. I'm going to try and keep it nice and punchy and short so it doesn't bog you down with too much information in one video. If you do like this video, please do give us a thumbs up. Give us a like, as I said, and give us a sub. And if you do enjoy my videos, make sure that you press the bell button, because then you can keep up to date with any updates, and as soon as I put a video online you'll get a notification. And if you want to support us further, there is a link to my Patreon account, so you can find that pretty easy, and all your support goes straight back into these videos. So without any further ado, let's dive straight in and have a little look. So as I said, I'm looking today at the digital version, and I am going to reference the digital version because actually I think there's some stuff in here that's really interesting, and actually something to take into account when you're considering what to purchase. I've got the book as well. I love the book. I purchased it from Wargames. Again, there's a link in the description below of how to get to Wargames. Great store, and highly recommend that you get all your hobby goodness from there. But the digital version does give you some really good advantages and some nice little tools that you're going to find really useful. First of all, it splits the different parts of the codex into nice chunks. So if you want to read the fluff bits, you want to know about the background from for your units and for the hive fleets, you've got that at the beginning, and that tells you a little bit about fluff. You've got some cool little pictures. The pictures themselves, great high quality. You can zoom in, have a look at them. If you want to get your inspiration for your armies, you've got all the tools that you need there to do that, which is a really nice touch. But what it means, because it's split in bite-sized chunks, if you don't want to look at fluff, you can go on to the next section, and the next section goes into detail again. This one talks in detail about the actual hive fleets. The next one talks about the actual the units themselves. So you know, if you want to drop in and have a little look at lictors, you can go in and you can look at lictors. You've got you can bring up the pages so you can look at the pictures in larger and zoom in on them, and it's really nice to kind of read through and to go through the details in there. Really like the way it's laid out, and these have come a long way. So if you bought a digital copy back in the day when they very first came out, they're a bit clunky, took a long time to kind of get through. They weren't as good. They're much better now, much better. So then if you want to look at more your kind of painting and your hobby side, you've got the section on the colours of the hive fleet. So again, you can get your inspiration there. A lot of what's in there as well gives you links, so you can go straight in and buy the models from there. It'll link you straight to the Games Workshop website, which, you know, is not a bad little thing as well. If you're just desperate, you want to get it straight away, you can jump on there and it'll give you all the details you need. And so again, some lovely glossy photos that are really great quality, and then you can zoom in on, get all your inspiration. You can see how things are painted. Works great. If we then go on after that, you then go into the meat and potatoes of this codex, which is the actual unit entries, their stats, and this is where the digital form really comes into its own and is really handy. So we are going to talk a little bit about the units, but before I kind of break into that, what I want to do is show you why I think it's really, really good. So if you go onto a unit, and we'll take the Broodlord as an example, what you'd have normally in the Codex is you'd have that, so it would look, I know you can't see it on here particularly well because of the glare, but you would have the stats, you'd have the different options, the weapon options there. What you have on this is a few really lovely little touches. So the little skull at the top, which says it's kind of an HQ, then you click on that and it brings up the points. So it'll tell you the points, it'll tell you whether it's including or not including war gear. So in this case it's not including war gear, so it says does not include war gear. It tells you how many models in the unit, and then what you can do is if you want to add something to it, so in this one he doesn't have anything that you can give to him, but if we go onto a Hive Tyrant for instance, on there what you can click on is you can click on monstrous scything talons for instance, and it will tell you straight on there the points cost for them. And one of the big problems in 8th edition is what you're doing is you're having to flick from one bit to the other, so you're having to go from the back of the book to the front of the book to try and find out points. With the digital version you've got everything you want actually on one page, so you can work things out straight away, which is great. Really, really nice touch. Can't sort of stress how useful that is, particularly when you're kind of trying to work out whether you want to take something or not. So I really, really like that feature of it. Also, because it's a digital version, what will happen is if there are updates in regards to FAQs and what have you, they get updated live onto here. So again, if you've got a book that suddenly actually it's not correct in points wise, this will actually update it. So you've got something that's quite live, quite responsive. So it's really nice to have a digital copy, and I'm not saying for 1 second don't get the book, because it's lovely to have a book to kind of flick through, and I still think there's nothing better than having that Codex in your hand. It's great, but to have that digital version, and I know it's expensive to have both, I get that, but it's a really, really nice tool. As I said, I kind of got away from the digital copies when I thought they were a little bit clunky, and I just generally was finding not using them at all, but particularly with the way the points work, I'm really loving the digital copy. So sort of wanted to just kind of throw that out there first of all for you guys. Really recommend them. They're a great one. So what we're going to do is let's start off with talking a little bit about, where should we start? Let's start with the units. I think that's probably the best thing to do. Let's start with the units and then we'll go from there. So, first of all we have the Broodlord. As I said, this will be very, very whistle stop. I'm not going to hold you up too long with this, guys. I just want to kind of give introductory players a kind of a first taste of what the Tyranid Codex is like, what to look for and what not to look for. So the Broodlord hasn't changed from the index. He's a great unit, really, really solid, an absolute beast, and at 162 points he's quite expensive, but he can do a lot. Particularly if you've got Gene Stealers in your army, he's a great addition, because what he will do for you is he buffs those Gene Stealers, he makes those Gene Stealers hit even better, so he's a great force multiplier. So if you're really going for a heavy Gene Stealer army, the Broodlord really has a great place there. He's obviously a Psyker as well, so he will be able to do some psychic buffing. The Hive Tyrant, huge changes on the Hive Tyrant. The Hive Tyrant now has +1 to his Invon save, so he now has a 4-up Invon save, which is incredibly good, because that means that 50% of the time he's going to make those saves with those high damage and high AP weapons, which is a huge change from the index and makes him very, very good. Also on top of that, his toughness has gone up by 1, so it's now toughness 7, making him a little bit more survivable. Really, really good. He's a very, very solid unit, and actually relatively good price for him. So bare basic on the ground walking, he's 143 points, and then with wings he's 170 points, and that's not bad for what he offers you. He he's a psyker, so he gets 2 powers, which is great, because the powers are really good in the Codex, and we will cover them briefly as well. He's got a vast array of different weapons he can choose, so he's very good in combat. The monstrous talons are great. The rending claws are probably my pick. The rending claws are incredibly good because they don't cost you any points, and they're still capable of doing a lot of damage at a real knockdown price. The huge big change as well is the Dakar Tyrants 100% back, because before you could only take the Devourers and they would only give you 12 shots. They were no longer twin linked, 12 shots was it, so most people were going for 12 shots from the Death Spitters, the monstrous Death Spitters with the slime and maggots, because they were giving you the -1 AP and the strength 7, so they were really good, and they are still a great option, 100%. And there's a lot of arguments to say that they're a better option, but the Devourers are back, and back with a vengeance, because now they are 24 shots. And bearing in mind that the Hive Tyrant, when he's unhurt, hits on a 2. That's crazy good. So I can't stress enough how effective the Dakar Tyrant is. 100%. He is back in business. But also the heavy venom cannon is very good now. It's got better. The Stranglethorn cannon was never a bad option before, but now you can upgrade that with one of the relics and turn it into a really nasty piece of kit that we will cover a little bit later. So Hive Tyrant, great unit. I think you can take quite a few of these guys, and that will give you a really solid aggressive part of your army. The other thing that's huge is they've brought in with the wings that you can deep strike your tyrants in, which you couldn't do before. So I think it's called Swooping Assault, I believe. Yeah, so it's called Swooping Assault, and basically what it means is you can deep strike your Hive Tyrant in. That's huge, really beneficial, because it means that he hasn't got to get shot for a turn. You can jump him straight down. He's going to be in range, you know, with some buffs and some rerolls. It's a good chance he can get in combat if you want to go combat based, and his guns are 100% going to be in range. So a really good option. He's got a lot more survivable. He packs, if not more a punch than he did. So 100% good. Swarmlord. So let's talk about the Swarmlord now. The Swarmlord has had some changes as well. He's got the same buffs as the Hive Tyrant, with the increase in toughness, the better save, and his save goes up to a 3-up in combat with his parries from his Bone Sabers. So again, an incredible buff there. His Bone Sabers have gone down with their potential damage they can do. They've gone from being a D6 damage, now they're a standard 3 damage, which is in some ways a little bit of a nerf, but they also do, on a roll of a 6 to wound, will do a mortal wound in addition to the damage. So in my mind, the consistency of these weapons actually makes that a buff overall. If you disagree, chuck it in the comments below. I know that people are split on whether that's a buff or a nerf. In my mind, I think it's a slight buff, but there you go. That's kind of me. Obviously, he has pretty much the same kit as he had previously. So he's a psyker. He can take 2 psychic powers. Really cool. He has Hive Commander still, which is such a good trick. It means that he can move a unit in the shooting phase, and obviously that unit then can charge. So if you've got stuff that's coming from reserve, it means that you've got pretty much auto first turn assaults, which is something which is incredibly powerful. And if you're interested in how that kind of works, I'll put a link to my advanced Tyranid tactics, so you should see that link. That will be a way that you can have a look into that tactic more. And those, I've gone through my Tyranid advanced tactics, and actually even with the new Codex they're very viable, but obviously we'll layer on those stratagems for further advanced tactics in the future. So that's the Swarmlord. The Tyranid Prime, a great character, really solid. He comes in at 100 points. Obviously you need to then put his war gear on top, but not too bad for a 6 wound guy. If you're going for warriors, which are not a bad choice, he's a good one to go for because he buffs those warriors. So I think he's a good solid choice. Really like him because he's under the 10 wounds, can't be targeted, he's a small model, keeps the points down, and he's got quite a good uses. So I do like the Tyranid Prime. I think he's going to be one useful guy to have. We go on to the Tervagon. No changes for the Tervagon, same as he was. The way that the Tervagon births troops changed slightly, so it happens at the start rather than the end, so potentially you've lost a little bit of movement for your spawned gaunts, and there's still an argument to say that Tervagon's a little bit expensive, but if you play him smart, that ability to keep replenishing your gaunts is great. It's still a very strong ability, and used cleverly it can really work well. So I think don't dismiss the Tervagon. He's still toughness 8, you know, he's got 14 wounds. He's a resilient guy, and you team him up with some of the other goodness, so either Malanthropes or Venomthropes, and you've got something that's very survivable sitting in the backfield supporting your army, doing a very solid job. So I think absolutely don't dismiss the Tervagon. He's quite expensive points wise, it's just making them useful, but 100% one to consider. Really good. Now the Neurothrope is what I would call the replacement to the Doom of Malatine. So now he sits in his own slot in the HQs. He's a nice cheap, he's the cheapest access we have to our HQ, and really solid, really solid, because again he's got a free up invuln because of his warp field. Yes, he only has 5 wounds, but he's a character with 5 wounds, so he's not going to get targeted as easily. He can do 2 psychic powers, which is great, so he can really put out some mortal wound output with psychic scream, which we'll talk about later, and obviously going for that smite. He can also regain wounds for himself or for nearby Zoanthropes, which is great as well. So if you've got a Zoanthrope heavy army, then he's a kind of must, but if you don't, you just want to keep your points down, he's a great way. And a lot of the time what we're talking about with Tyranids is we want to get them into that all magical brigade detachment to give us loads and loads of CPs, and a Neurothrope is one way to get access to that really well. So solid unit. He comes in at 70 points, which is an absolute steal at what he's capable of doing, so a really good unit, and one you see a lot of. Old One Eye we go on to next. So Old One Eye has got a hell of a lot better, crazy better, because they've dropped him in wounds. Now normally you'd say that's a crazy thing, but actually in 8th edition dropping to 9 wounds and being a character means he can no longer be targeted. So actually, whereas Old One Eye was just going to get shot to pieces because he was a character Carnifex that could do a lot of damage in combat, now he is a real wrecking ball that can't be targeted. He buffs your other Carnifexes around, and Carnifexes, as we'll talk about in a minute, Carnifexes are so good now in the new Codex that actually having Old One Eye really helps that out. And that kind of goes on and on with this. A lot of the time, if you're basing your army around one type of unit that you really like, and there's so many cool ones in there, then by picking that character, you've got an ability to make that unit even more effective, even more fun, and even more fluffy. So Old One Eye I think is a really good unit. He's gone up in points, he's 200 points now, but actually for what he does, it's really good point level, because he's got 9 wounds and he can't be targeted. Really good, very effective unit, and one I think you'll see on the table, and one if you like Carnifexes, get yourself an Old One Eye, really go for it. I'd heavily recommend it. So that's your HQ slots, and as you can see from there is no bad HQ in there at all. Every single one has its place, every single one is a solid, there is no bad one. So that's a good start, guys. There is no duff one in there at all. Every single one fills a job, it is a very playable in a both friendly and a competitive list. So bear that in mind, guys, really bear that in mind. So go whatever way you want. My picks would be, if you go Swarm Lord, you need to base the army around him. If you go Flyrants or Tyrants, in fact don't go Tyrants, go Flyrants. Your Flyrants, I would recommend taking a few of them, because again, just the damage that a few can do is crazy good. Your Prime, your Tyranid Prime, I wouldn't take them unless you're going to make use of the Tyranid Warriors, but I think Tyranid Warriors have a really good place, so it's not a bad tactic. And the Neurothrope, great, amazing. Tervagon, very good as well. So look, really good HQ slots. We'll go on to the troops choices. So we've got warriors. Now, we've touched on warriors briefly. They've not changed dramatically, but they're a really solid choice. Their weapons really good. Their standard devour is not bad, 3 shots, but the one probably to go for every time is to go for the Death Spitter. The Death Spitter basically is a heavy bolter, strength 5, -1 AP. Really can't go wrong. 3 shots, really good solid weapon, and not particularly expensive points wise, so you can get that in there and make those warriors really effective. Combat wise, they're decent. You give them a couple of bone swords. I wouldn't go for the lash whip, but go for a couple of bone swords, and these guys can do some work. You probably want a delivery system for them, so you either want them in a pod, but predominantly probably using maybe some other stratagems and get them in another way that we'll talk about later. But warriors good, or absolutely keep them cheap and cheerful, give you a nice synapse web at the back, and they're decent. They've got 3 wounds each, and at a points value of 20 points base for a synapse creature is really good. Synapse is key, but actually that's a great, easy, cheap and effective way of getting access to it. When you're upgrading your one Tyranid warrior to get him one of the specialist weapons, I think now the Venom Cannon is an awesome choice. It's a 20-point weapon, so there's a little bit of points, but it's 36 inch range, which is great range. It gives you assault D3, it's strength 8. It is -2 AP and it's D3 damage, and that's really solid for just a weapon that your little troops are going to take. I think that's a really good choice. So that's probably the one I would go for now, and that's crazy because Venom Cannons used to be horrendously bad, but now they are a very solid choice. Let's go on to Gene Stealers. Gene Stealers, pretty much the same. They have had some slight changes, some tiny little tweaks to potentially give them some extra little nice stuff. So we'll go over them briefly for you guys. So Gene Stealers still incredible. If you're not watching anything before and you've not discovered Gene Stealers, probably point for point up in the top 5 assault units in the game. They really absolutely can do some serious work. They're a lot of fun. If you roll with a big unit of 20, you are going to be rolling handfuls of dice. So great fun. They can be played really well in both fluffy and competitive lists. Highly recommend them being part of your army. They come in at 10 points a model base, which is decent, and actually there's a great argument about don't add anything to them. At that point they're an effective unit. You can give them some extra juicy stuff, and that's what we'll talk through. So what you can give them, so you can give these guys, if I can find it right, so you can give them where is it? So you can give these guys flesh hooks, and flesh hooks are an assault weapon, so they're assault 2, their strength for the user, their strength 4, and yeah, so but they can be shot in combat basically, so they're okay. And you've got acid more as well, which is not a bad option, because it is -3 AP, 1 damage, so it's pretty good there. Not bad option at all. And then you've got toxin sacks, which basically means that on a 6 they do an additional 1 damage, which is great. But that does, as soon as you've got that in a big unit, racks up points wise pretty quick. And then you've got the very new thing, which is the extended carapace. The extended carapace for 2 points will give them a 4+ save rather than their 5+ save, which is not to be sneered at. But the problem is you lose one of their special rules, which is swift and deadly, which means that basically swift and deadly means that they can move, run and still assault, or advance and then assault. They lose that, which for me is too much of a sacrifice for what they're probably designed for. So I don't think you'll see too much extended carapace, but it's a nice little thing to have the option of. So that's Gene Stealers, really good solid unit. Again, you probably want them with some sort of delivery method. The other thing to quickly touch on is they have something called infestation now. So infestation means that basically you can put some little infestation nodes, which you actually get in the Gene Stealer box set, which look kind of like little nests. So you can put these, you can put 3 of them I believe. Let's just double check. you can place 4 of them in your deployment zone, and then you can keep your gene stealers back, and then basically they can pop out of those nodes where you want to. So what that means is if you're not using a delivery method, it means that you can stop the gene stealers from getting shot to pieces first turn. Those nodes will disappear as they get discovered by your opponent, which can be a dangerous tactic potentially, because if they can get in your lines quickly and they can delete all of those nodes, then your gene stealers are going to be destroyed. So slightly dangerous, but with Thor you'll probably be alright. I think though on the whole it's not the greatest method. You probably want to deliver these guys right into the fight through other methods quickly, but you know, if you're not, then that's a great little way to keep them safe. Termagants, same, no change there. Really cool, cool little unit, great for bubble wrap. They chaff 100%. There's some great little ways to make them more effective using the stratagems, which we'll cover in either later in this video or in other videos. But you know, Devourers, something you need to really understand. Devourers are an incredible way of putting out so much shots, but again, then you're using them in a different way, and you actually want to get these guys in the fight. Majority of the time you're using them with your flesh borers, and the flesh borers you're using them to protect your artillery style bugs, or just to kind of make sure that nothing's going to charge your character's first turn, and then they're very effective that. Also, you team them up with that Tervigan to keep them regenerating, and you tend to be wanting to take big units of Termagants. Try and always take them in unit 30. We'll go on to Hormagaunts. Hormagaunts are something that a lot of people love. I really struggle to use them effectively, but they are a great unit for really agitating your opponent and putting early pressure on. So they're quite quick, and you know, they're very cheap points. So they come in at 5 points a model, so they're cheap and cheerful, and you can really get them in your enemy's face pretty quick, again using stratagems to make them more effective. I've struggled to really work them well, but I think Hormagaunts have a very good place. And then we're going to Ripper Swarms. Now, Ripper Swarms are the cheapest troop choice that you've got, and a great way again to make up your brigades, so not to be sneered at. Absolutely really good solid unit. So expect to see a lot of them. You deep strike them in, put them on objectives, great unit. Then we've got Tyrant Guard. So we're now slipping into the elite section. So Tyrant Guard, probably one of the weakest units in the Codex. Not going to cover them massively. They are great at protecting your foot slogging tyrants, but then you are playing the points for them. So they're 35 points a model base without war gear, to basically take your wounds off your tyrants. So to be fair, they're probably the standout worst unit in the Codex, but if you disagree, again, put it in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and if you're using them really successfully, love to hear about it. Now we go on to Hive Guard. Now Hive Guard are incredibly good. They were great before, and they've got even better because of the Hive Fleets. They are a really solid choice. And again, I'm going to talk about Hive Fleets later on, but actually Hive Guard in its own right is a crazy good unit. In my mind, you always take the Impaler Cannon at 36-inch range. It's great for taking things out to mid to long range. It's strength 8, so it's going to do damage, and it does D3 damage each, which is great, at -2. So solid weapon. Doesn't need line of sight, ignores cover as well, so great. And you want stuff that you don't need line of sight, because then you can hide it and make it very effective. On top of that, having 3 wounds and toughness 5 is not to be sneered at. So a really good unit, and one I'm definitely looking at getting in your additional armies. It gives you a little bit of shooting, and probably one of the standout stars of the Codex. Go on to Lictors. Lictors is your cheapest access for your elite choice, because you can take just one single one of them. And they're decent. They're a good little irritation. You can pop them up in the enemies sort of hidden away in a corner, because they have the kind of deep strike special rule, and they're good. They're good. They don't really hit incredibly hard, but they're quite hard to be taken down as well. So yeah, because they have a special rule that basically means that they add 2 to their cover rather than 1. So they're a little bit, they stick around, they can hide, and they're okay. So a good little cheap irritation unit, not to be sneered at, I think. And there's some stratagems again to make these guys a little bit more effective, but I like them. Death Leaper got a little bit worse. So his special rule, which was a little bit OP, because you could really kind of pretty much irritate people so much by having that Death Leaper on top of them. you can't do that anymore. So his "it's after me" rule has changed slightly. It got a little bit worse. Basically what it does is at the start of the battle you pick a character and you get rerolls to hit, basically with a Death Leaper against it. So it's pretty poor now, very like, you know, it's not going to happen often, let's say. So Death Leaper is okay, he's pretty good. He does give you -2 to hit him in combat, so if he can get in combat he can really kind of slow down some heavy hitters because they just struggle to hit him. So he can be good irritation. He's not that expensive. He comes in at the grand total of 90 points. He's okay, he's not bad. I don't think he stands out, he's okay. Zoanthropes. So the Zoanthropes, very good. They are a solid choice. I don't use them too much, but I think particularly with the Neuanthrope they can be a valuable choice. So they basically do a better smite, and the more Zoanthropes you get, the better that smite is. So you know, so you want to be doing, because it does additional mortal wounds. So yeah, I'm not going to go into huge details. I'm not a massive fan, but I think these guys could be incredibly powerful going forward, and I'd love to hear your experiences of them. So the Zoanthrope I think is a solid choice in that elite slot. It's definitely a great way of doing mortal wounds. Again, I think from a delivery method, you want to be looking at making sure that you get them where you need them straight away, get them to start doing damage, get them to start tanking, because they have that free up invuln, because they're multi-wound, they'll irritate your opponent quite effectively. They're also synapse, so I think they're a very solid choice. They come in at 40 points a model, so actually I think they're really good. The Malinceptor, not great, got slightly better. He's come down in points, I believe he's 162 points. There's nothing really you can add to him, so he will be that amount of points. He's got 12 wounds, his toughness 7, nice for his toughness 8. He's also got an invuln save. Again, his invuln saves are 4 up. I think potentially at 3 up he could be really irritating, and then he'd be valuable. He can do multiple mortal wounds to units around him with his special ability, which is Psychic Overload, and he can take 2 psychic powers. So look, he's not terrible. He's such a cool model. I really love an excuse to use him. I think he's just way down the pecking order at the moment. Venomthropes. So Venomthropes got a bit of a buff. So the Venomthropes now, if you take a unit of 3, they affect monsters as well. They only affected infantry before, which is cool, because that means that now there is a reason to take them over a Malinthrope, because their range is longer, so you've got a bigger area of effect. And now with 3 of them you can affect monsters. I think they're useful. I think they're a solid unit. I do quite like them now. They're not bad. I think you'll still probably take a Malinthrope over a unit of Venomthrope, but because of the synapse. But I still think Venomthropes have got a place now, and I think you'll see them potentially more on the table. So they're a good unit. Pyrovores. Pyrovores are as they were, which is a hell of a lot better than in 7th edition, but still not earth-shattering. There's abilities to make them shoot twice from the stratagems, and if you can kind of deep strike them in, potentially they can be a good little unit. They're not bad in combat, so you know they're a hell of a lot better than they used to be. They come in at 38 points. I think they're good to use in a fun game, not a competitive unit, but if you love Pyrovores, there's definitely a place for them. The Haruspex is another kind of also unit, so he can do very well in combat. He's potentially just not really quite quick enough to get in the fight where he needs to, and he doesn't hit significantly harder than the other units to maybe make him really good. The great thing about him is he is toughness 8, he has 13 wounds, which is not too bad, and he can do a lot of damage. He is particularly brutal in combat, but I think there's other units that are pretty much as brutal, that are more efficient at other jobs on the battlefield and are quicker and more effective at getting where they need to. So again, probably not one you put in your list, but again, model is incredible. If you like them, get them out on the board 100%. Gargoyles. So gargoyles haven't changed, but they can deep strike in now. They couldn't before with swooping assault. So they're great if you want to put in a very offensive, wall of flyrants that are dropping in. Then actually, if you put in a unit of gargoyles that can bubble wrap those flyrants, particularly if they're shooting flyrants, it's a great tactic. because they've got the fly, they can be tying up units that are potentially behind the wall. So I think gargoyles actually have a real solid use. I think they're a real clever thinkers unit, and I think actually a big unit of gargoyle could be very, very competitive. I think they're one to definitely look into. If you look at all the crazy ways that you could use gargoyles, I think there's definitely some hidden depth in gargoyles. So if you've got your gargoyles hidden away because they were there from your skyblight formation back in 7th, absolutely dust those gargoyles off, because I think they've got a use again. So it's cool stuff. Raveners are one of my picks for the Codex. I really, really like them, particularly teamed up with some of the stratagems and the hive fleets. I think they're great. They're incredibly good in combat, and they also shoot very, very, very well, and they're reasonably cheap. So they base come in at 23 points, so pretty much just same points as a tyrant, as a warrior. A little bit more expensive, but they put up a lot more hurt. Incredibly quick, very versatile unit. Because they can deep strike in, you can very much use them as an objective grabbing unit, or you can use them as a unit that is going to harass or cause damage, or even deliver other units using the right stratagems and hive fleets. So I really like Raveners. I think if you've got Raveners, start using them, because I think you're going to have a lot of fun with them. They're a really cool unit. The Red Terror, and the Red Terror again, Red Terror in itself is not great, but actually team him up with Raveners and he makes those Raveners even better. Makes those Raveners better in combat, which is key. So at 75 points, which I think is what he comes in at, let's double check. 75 points, I think the Red Terror is a really valuable use. He also, if you're filling up that brigade, 75 points, not too expensive. Chuck him in as one of your fast attack slots, and he fills that slot great. It's a really, really cool unit. The Swallow Hole rule, I'm not even going to go into, but basically you're never going to use it, because most of the stuff that he's going to be targeting is little and on 1 wound probably, so it's unlikely you're going to use it. So kind of there we go. But yeah, he still has the swallow whole fluffy rule, which is cool. Moving on, we are now moving into the mucilid spores. So the mucilid spores are the big old spores, so they're cool. They, you know, they do a bit of damage. They're a nice cheap bomb basically, and an effective way again of filling slots. There's not too much to say about them. Again, it's a way of doing mortal wounds, and it's a good way of blocking your opponent, but probably find that just spore mines are a cheaper, cheerful, better way of doing it, because they have a bit of a bigger footprint, because you've got more than one of them. So mucilid spores, okay, but probably you just generally use them as a deterrent and a way of filling your brigade. Spore mines, we come on to. Spore mines are really good. Really, really like spore mines. They're a very, very effective blocking unit. They're a very, very effective irritation unit, and they can do quite a lot of damage as well. You're probably going to use them more coming from other units that we'll go into in a minute, but they're great, and I think that again a really cheap and cheerful way of filling up your brigade. The Exocrine, same, got a little bit cheaper. Why he needs to get cheaper, I don't know. He is great, awesome, awesome, awesome. I would say my thing is when you're listening to this, you've probably heard about the Exocrine, you've probably listened to other reviews. Don't get carried away with the Exocrine. You've got to remember that his big bad weapon is only strength 7. Strength 7 is not a really heavy killing weapon, and when you're spending that amount of points, so when you're spending 216 points, you want something that if it's killing chaff, you want it probably to be cheaper, and you want it to have more shots. With 12 shots if it stands still at 36 inches, it's very, very good, but it's not necessarily going to really, really hurt your heavy hitting stuff, because it's probably wounding on 5s. So for me, I think the Hive Guard are a better option than Exocrines, is my personal opinion, for their points. But do not underestimate the Exocrine. He's an incredibly good unit. Toughness 8, 12 wounds, can't be sneered at. He's a solid choice. I would just say, kind of play him, have a go with it before you kind of go out and say I'm going to have 4 or 5. Just try him, see how many points he gets back for you, because I don't think he's the auto include. He's still great in competitive lists, and there's a good argument to have 2 of them, 100%, but I wouldn't say potentially he's the auto include that I maybe thought he was 3-4 months ago. Give him a go, play him, see what you think. I think Hive Guards are a better option. Obviously, I must say we're in the heavy support now, guys, of course. So the next one is the Tyranid. Tyranid's got a huge buff, huge buff, and can be used in many different ways now. Great unit, incredibly good. Let's talk mainly though about the big change, which is the rupture cannon. That's the one. So the rupture cannon was the Tyranid big gun. So it's the heavy hitting gun, and it was pretty rubbish before. Now it is 48 inches, which I believe it was before, heavy 3, but it's strength 10, -3 AP and D6 damage, which is mental good. It's 49 points just for that gun alone, but bear in mind, if it stands still, it can shoot that twice. If you take the right high fleet, it's probably re-rolling ones. That's pretty epic. It's a really solid weapon, and fulfills a job that potentially nothing else in the Codex does. So I think it's a really good unit. Again, toughness 8 with 14 wounds. It's going to hang around, but there's something to be said around taking the acid spray. The acid spray, you use him in a completely different way, but he's tough, he's got lots of wounds. You get this guy forward, he's got, you know, he's 2d6 shots from that, -1 d3 damage. That's a crazy powerful weapon. If you happen to have something close to you and they're distracted by other units, those other units then fall back and he shoots that twice because he's not moved. That's mental. So there's probably a lot to say that the acid spray is probably the best option. But the rupture cannon now definitely means business, and one to look out for 100%. Tyranid, really good choice, really good solid choice. Go on to Biovores. Now Biovores are probably one of the top 5 units I would say in this Codex. They're a way of doing mortal wounds really effectively, but also when you miss, they make spore mines, and those spore mines do not come out of your reinforcement points, so you can get multiple spore mines on the table through missing with Biovores, but when they hit they do a lot of damage. You then team them up with the correct high fleet and potentially re-rolling ones. These guys are something you're going to want to put in a lot of your armies. So Biovores, they're quite expensive to buy, which is one of the frustrations. So look out for some conversion tips. I'm going to probably be working on some myself, and I'll probably put them on the channel as well so you can see, because they're not the cheapest financially to get hold of, but Biovores are a really solid choice, and I think you probably want to look at maybe having 3 or even 6 of these in your army. Great solid unit. We go into the Toxicrene. Toxicrene is another one of those also units. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it heavily, but it's a decent unit. It can do a bit of damage. It's not very quick, but it is dangerous if it gets in assault. Okay, so let's talk about Carnifexes. Carnifex is the next one. Carnifex is huge. So they got cheaper and they got better, and there's so much on Carnifex. I'm going to try and do a whistle-stop tour of Carnifexes, but please do talk about it in the comments below. Let us know what you think, let us know what you're using them for. So what we've got is, so you can arm these guys in lots and lots of different ways, and you have 3 variants. So you have the Carnifex, which is basically you can kit out exactly how you like. You have the Screamer Killer, and you have the Formback. So the Screamer Killer is your dedicated assault type Carnifex. Your Formback is more dedicated to shooting, and your Carnifex is that you can literally load him up however you want. So you've got all sorts of options that you had in the last one, but the big changes, and the ones I'm going to home in on today for you, is I'm going to talk about some of their upgrades that really make them stand out. So what they've got is you can have a few little upgrades on them. So you've got something called Enhanced Senses. Enhanced Senses then gives them a ballistic skill of 3+ rather than 4+. So if you go the shooting route, what a great way of making those Devourers that we talked about earlier, which is 24 shots potentially, hitting on 3s, which is very good. Then you have the Spore Cysts. Now the Spore Cysts mean that when things are shooting those Carnifexes, they are -1 to hit them. So potentially if you're going more of an assault Carnifex, what a great way of getting that Carnifex safer, closer, and doing the damage. Really crazy good. We've got the Tusks upgrade, which will give you a +1 attack, again helping out in combat, really making use of those different heads in the Carnifex kit. So you know, really cool. You've got Chichin Fawns, which is a way of doing mortal wounds at the end of combat, so more mortal wounds coming from these Carnifexes. So yeah, I mean, there's so much to go into. I'm not going to go in massive detail because I'll probably do a video on its own on these. Talk a bit about spine banks. So you've got spine banks, which is another way of shooting. So there's ways of making these guys very assault based, but actually giving them shooting that's coming from, you know, their back or wherever. So very effective, very effective. Screamer Killer. The Screamer Killer is your assault Carnifex, and he is terrifying quite literally in combat. So he has a rule where -1 morale check for units around him. He has got his bio Scream, which is assault D6, strength 7, -4, damage 1, which is basically, you know, like a plasma gun, but a D6 plasma gun, which is crazy good. So really damaging there. And they're beasts in combat, and they have the -1 to hit, so really good. So there's something to be said around having a lot of Carnifexes in your army now. They're so cheap, they're very effective, and what cool models. So definitely, if you've got Carnifexes before, if you like Carnifexes, there's a great place for them now in the new Codex. And as I said, we spoke about we haven't spoken about, but Formback's basically a shooting variant, really cheap again, and you know, you can set them up with all those gun goodness, let's say. So we go on to the Morlock. Morlock hasn't really got much better. I really don't like the Morlock, to be honest. Again, he's one of the ones I would say is a poorer unit, but you know, you like the Morlock, he's such a cool model, use him. He can still do mortal wounds to things around him, which is cool when he comes up, and he's still a big scary monstrous creature, so he's toughness 6, 12 wounds. He's going to die pretty quickly, but he's very cheap. So he is 104 points, which is really cheap and cheerful for a big old monstrous creature. And there's an argument to say you can have quite a few of these guys and chuck them everywhere and just have fun with it. But I don't think he's a competitive unit, in my opinion. We've got the Trigon and the Trigon Prime now. Now, both of these not changed. They're both the same, and are solid units, absolute beasts in combat. They are probably your scariest assault monsters in the book, as far as they still have the if I could find it on here. So they have, yeah, so their massive scything talons are still D6 damage. So with 7 attacks, which is what they get because they get an extra 1 because they've got 2 sets. So they have tons and tons of attacks with the potential of doing serious amounts of damage. So these guys are actually, from a hitting point of view, hit harder than anything else. They really do. But they do go down pretty quick as well. Again, only toughness 6 and no invuln save, 12 wounds. They will die pretty quick, but great delivery method, and they can do some serious damage. Tyrannocyte. The Tyrannocyte got slightly cheaper, but the Venom Cannons went up in points. So you can, at cheap and cheerful, Tyrannocyte with the Death Spitters is got a little bit cheaper, more affordable points wise, and still an amazing way of getting predominantly that Swarm Lord where you want him to get him. So you probably want at least one of these guys in your army because it is your Swarm Lord's transport. If you've not got a Swarm Lord, there's probably better, cheaper ways of getting your guys in where you need them. So that's kind of where we are with that. Let's talk about the Harpy and the Hive Crone. Again, not huge differences, but with the Harpy, the Venom Cannons got better. So 2 heavy Venom Cannons is not to be sneered at. It can do some serious work, and again, pretty cheap and cheerful unit, so not bad. They've actually became like flyers as well, but yeah, and then the Hive Crone is a solid choice as well. Not a bad unit, is pretty good. Not too much to talk about with them, but both do a job. They're nice and quick, they'll get in your enemy's face, and the Hive Crone particularly very good at dealing with enemies' flyers. Sporocyst, it's a way of, again, getting access to some extra spore mines, but to be honest with you, at 79 points, I think you probably find better uses of those points. So that's all the units, guys, and bear in mind that we've almost been going for an hour just talking about the units, and I think I've been going pretty quick, full speed on them. So that's the units, and what I'm going to do in the next video is I will concentrate on the high fleets and the stratagems. But thank you for watching this first overview review on the new Tyranid Codex. If you have enjoyed it and you liked it, please do hit the like button, do subscribe, and I'll see you soon with more Tyranid goodness. See you again soon. Bye for now.